is recorded to cloud. I am also going to make Boris a co-host in case, who knows, asteroid strikes in central North Carolina. Haven't happened, but could. Let's see. So do that. Clear a portion of my screen. All right. Welcome, y'all, to Tools for Thought Rocks. This is Spatial Canvases session 2. For those of you who this is your first time to Tools for Thought Rocks, we're kind of a group focused on... Oh, Arnoldo. That, now I'm remembering why I was looking for claim host so that I could mute Arnoldo. Thanks, Boris. So yeah, we are Tools for Thought Rocks as a group focused on second brains, tools for thinking, that kind of stuff. And it's not just, even though today we'll have Pol and Paul who are both creating their own tool for thought, this is not only for people to come speak who are developing tools themselves. All of us are users of our computers to help us think better. And therefore we have constructed our own tools in a sense by cobbling together what's available to us and making the best of what we can make the best of, whether that involves their computer or your whiteboard or whatever. We're all trying to think with our devices and with our environment, and so that's what this group is about. The primary resource is a community on Luma, which all of you are now members of because you couldn't get into this Zoom link unless somebody shared it with you, which is possible. So toolsforthought.rocks gives you a short link to that. Yes, Robert asks, what are thought rocks? Yeah, the name could use some help. I blame Boris. No. So yeah, we have a community on Luma. That's where there's events. Right now, the events happen roughly once a month, although with the number of spatial canvases that are sprouting from the ground like a garden after a heavy rain, it's possible that we'll need to do like 2 of these a month in order to make any headway in talking to different people who are building spatial canvases, because there's just so many. But yeah, check out Luma. That's where you'll find out about upcoming events, past events, links to recordings. Speaking of recordings, this event will be recorded and the recording will be posted on YouTube. So adjust your ties accordingly, because your face might be on YouTube if you're going to talk. You can see past recordings on YouTube on our Tools for Thought Rocks channel. We've got well over a year worth of content at this point of some really interesting, fascinating people. Neither of which are Boris or me. This is like the last you'll hear from each one of us. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's who we are. If you want to hang out in Discord, we do not have our own Discord intentionally because we don't need yet another Discord. But if you would like to go to the Fission Discord at fission.codes/Discord, there is a Tools for Thought channel there. Fission is graciously hosting us in their Discord and providing this Zoom link. So thank you to Fission for kind of being the unofficial sponsors of this meetup. And then, yeah, so this is the monthly speaker series. The last thing is just a couple logistic things during the talks. Pol and Paul are both going to be demoing and speaking for around 20 minutes each, and then we'll have like 20 to 25 minutes for questions and answers after they speak. I'm going to let them set the sort of ground rules for their talk if they want to be interrupted or ask questions during that kind of stuff. We're a pretty small group, and so you all have the permission to unmute yourself and ask questions. Pol's already giving thumbs up to that. Or you can, if you would like to use your hand, like the hand raise thing, me or Boris will be watching for a little hand to go up in Zoom by pressing that button like Boris just did. And then also, if you're shy about saying your question out loud, feel free to put it in chat, and either Boris or I will interject as appropriate. Or if you're in a place where you can't unmute for some reason, that's fine too. Cool. Okay. Without further ado, let me introduce Spatial Canvases. We've been talking about this for we had last month, sorry, we had Canopio and Edvo come and talk. And one of the reasons we're interested in Spatial Canvases is that Spatial Canvases are a fairly new medium that has been getting a lot of attention lately. There's the analogs like whiteboards and sticky notes and that crazy meme with the guy with all the string board all over the wall. We all know those, but there's these digital, and there's sort of digital descendants like Sketchpad and Miro and stuff like that. But more recently, there's been a lot of interest and a lot of spatial canvases being applied to all kinds of different things. And so it seemed like a good time to have a set of a set of Tools for Thought Rocks meetings that are all around spatial canvases because they're being used for different things in different ways. And so my belief is that mediums have an actual grain to them, kind of like working with wood. And if you work against the grain of the medium, it's not going to work well. There are certain things that spreadsheets are great for. There are certain things that spreadsheets are not great for. The size of things that spreadsheets are great for is far larger than most of us probably imagined when we first started playing with spreadsheets. And probably the same thing goes with spatial canvases, but there's some things that they're not great for. And so my kind of thinking about what we're doing right now is we're sort of in this parallel search of the possibility space of what spatial canvases are good for and what they're not good for. And sort of on the front runners of that space are people like Pol and Pol, who are spending significant time and energy trying to make the spatial canvas do things. And specifically today, we'll be talking about programmable canvases. So what if you could actually write code on a spatial canvas and lay it out in some way? Both Pol and Pol have, their tools have different approaches to that. And it'll be really cool to see how that works. So I'm gonna let Pol go first, but now that I've kind of monologued at you for a few minutes, does anybody have any questions or comments before Pol goes? Awesome. All right, cool. Well, real quick introduction for Pol. Pol is working on a tool called Firma.ws out of, totally forgetting the name of this. What's the name of the group? Batu. How do you pronounce it actually, Pol?
Yeah, either way is fine. Batu, either works.
Check out batou.xyz. They have some other cool projects besides Firma that sort of precede Firma. So some neat stuff they've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, exploring HCI. And they've gone all the way to the route of like building devices and working with like physical devices to actually extend HCI beyond software, which if in my opinion, that's the right way to do it, is to not think just in terms of software, but think software and hardware. And so Pol's going to be showing off Fermat today. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he's going to share with us. Take it away.
Cool. Let me just say the founder of Cosmic is also called Pol, which is very funny because it seems like all of the people are pursuing spatial canvases have some P or Pol, at least, because Virgin also Canopia, right? It's just quite funny.
Yeah, and Paul Roney, who Pol is referring to from Cosmic, will actually be speaking in a few weeks at
right.
Rocks. So I'll see if I can find another Paul or Pol or something to go along with Pol from Cosmic for next month's meeting.
Sorry, I was just telling Ariel here that he should mute himself. All right, so yeah, maybe I'm gonna try to screen share here. Where is this? Can I screen share?
You should be able to. I did grant permission.
Oh, yeah. This is how proficient I am using Zoom.
You're lucky to not be.
All right, so yeah, you might be able to see my screen now. This is Batu. This is our research kind of lab. We started a few years back, as Jess was mentioning. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for being here today. This is like such a joyful community. I think people that are exploring mediums, tools, thought, and new interfaces, which I think is very, very exciting. So basically, it was also our mission a few years back when we, built this lab with this idea of rethinking how people interact with tools, computers, and their ideas. There are a few things we've built. So this is the most relevant for today. I would say the augmented desk, which then led to Fermat, which I'm going to do a quick demo of. So this is the hardware that Jess was talking about. It's kind of a dynamic land project, very similar to that. We didn't use markers in any sense. It was just a projector and a camera hanging over a desk surface. It was actually the desk I worked for. I worked with, for the years after building it, actually. So just recently, I bought a proper desk. But this was the desk we were using. It has a end-user programmable kind of environment where you can drop stuff around. The computer tries to understand via computer vision what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve. You can paint things, you can draw things, you can kind of handwrite, so like people can, use it without having very much of any kind of technical knowledge, really. Just with their handwriting, there are no weird devices like keyboards or mice. It's just all commonplace day-to-day objects. Some of these are 3D printed for the sake of being pragmatic, but you could just like a rubber band, for example, or some jewelry we've seen people use to play with the gravity example, for example, right? So this idea of a end-user programmable collaborative environment, several people can work on top of this physical surface, and then a bunch of programs that are running next to people was, I think, the genesis of the idea behind Fermat. So actually now we define ourselves as a collaboration company. So man-to-man collaboration, man-to-machine collaboration, one-to-many, people collaboration, and then, many to machines collaboration as well. And we think that having these kind of spatial surfaces with a bunch of agents running around helping you out to, accomplish certain tasks in your day-to-day are a great value proposition and something that's been actually massively unexplored. So our references are, very small talk-ish things from Xerox PARC times, dynamic land from that Victor as well. But these led us to build Fermat because we said, okay, we cannot ship an entire desk to everyone's home. So let's just build a website with the same, kind of operational principles here. So with a canvas that is collaborative and user programmable, there are a bunch of agents running around helping you out when you need them. So this is Fermat. We now sell it or call it a augmenting creativity kind of tool. And our goal is to unstuck your brainstorming with AI on these spatial canvas. We support that people can build and use superpowers or tools built by other people. And I'm going to proceed do a demo of it. So this Fermat is a totally blank spatial canvas here. You can just take your notes to a bunch of different multimedia, images, buttons, text, whatever you can imagine. We have also, different types of input. So it is a range input or a slider. And very akin to HyperCard, you can start programming this. So I could go ahead and tell this button, hey, when the user clicks me, maybe, turn your background to red. Just like that. I'm gonna actually zoom a bit more so you can see it properly. And I wrote some of that code, when the user clicks me, send my background to red, I can click it and there we go. It's end user scriptable. You can add new behaviors and start building on top of other people's behaviors as well. How do you do that? Well, there is this public toolbox. I'm going to zoom over here. There's this public toolbox that you can upload stuff you've built to or download other people's stuff. So let's just maybe go ahead and try it's a very simple application. So for example, like a counter. So this is a counter app, right? I can just click and it counts. I can always go check how something works. So you got this entire idea of end-user programming plus GitHub, because you can see the open source of the tool. You can see the source of how the tool works. And then you can start mixing and matching. Oh my God, I have to move zoom all the time. Can I just, yeah. So what we did then was, okay, what kind of things make sense to build here? And one of our earliest hires, Gerard, who is also here from Google, said, hey, so I remember we were working on something like LLMs, generative AI on spatial canvases. And this is what I basically want to talk to you about. First thing was end user programming on a canvas. Second is, AI on a canvas. For this, I'm going to use this template, which we call GPT-3 with Stable Diffusion. You can already see, if you know a bit about these models, what this is going to look like. I can basically use any one of these pinned buttons that are tools, help me do particular applications on top of my data. And these are again end user programs, so I can always check the code that is running behind every one of those buttons basically. I'm going to go ahead and try to generate a cat wearing a hat. This is my favorite demo. But if I try to generate a Stable Diffusion image using this prompt, this is probably not a very good prompt. So what is happening now, we're going to a server and we're going to retrieve a AI generated image using this prompt here, a cat wearing a hat. So in this case, there is no hat. AIs are not always super precise. But let's maybe go ahead and use another model, another AI model to improve this prompt. So I just clicked here and then clicked generate a prompt. It's now going to another API call, getting a bunch of different prompts. These are much better, right? So, sorry, is there a question? No, okay. So I can now generate of these prompts, right? And these are prompts that are improved by the AI. So I am, as a human, now being augmented because, I started using a very silly prompt, then the AI came, helped me out. And this is all about this idea of augmentation, right? Oh, this is very cool. Actually, we're nearing Halloween. I'm actually, gonna get all the keywords from this one I really like. Black cat in a witch's hat. I'm gonna take midnight here, maybe even cauldron. But I don't like the artist, so I'm just gonna add Van Gogh here. And now it's just me and the AI collaborating to make something great. So as you can see, I'm constantly chaining different models together. And this is a very basic thing we've discovered and very cool to do. So you get Van Gogh painted by Van Gogh, but actually instead of the cat, you get him, which is, that's pretty cool. If you don't want to, if you don't know much about art history and you don't know many artists, you can always go here and ask for more keywords, or maybe, oh, okay, keywords is not working today. Whatever. Yeah, fine. Whatever. Oh, sorry, I'm not using the right tool. It's text variations. Yeah, I wanted to use text variations. Okay, so there you go, right? I can now, the system is now suggesting me different artists. If I ask for text variations on Cauldron, I'm gonna get, different typically magical stuff. Or Autumn, probably gonna get seasons, hopefully. Hitting variations here. Yeah, seasons, right? And it's limited to 4, which makes me very, very happy because you never know how these systems are going to react. So it is very important when you are using these kind of generative AI models to use your judgment. This is not to replace humans. This is just switching a bit the capabilities of what humans are actually capable of and important to use for, or to be, which is the judges of what this model is producing, and then you can start mixing and matching using your preferences, basically. So this is a very image-heavy example, but I also wanted to show you the philosophy workshop. Maybe something that can be sexier to this audience as well. I know Martin here will appreciate it. By the way, this is completely free. You can just go ahead and use it. We don't charge you for using any of these models. Let's just maybe start with a philosophical statement. So like we live in a simulation. I can go ahead and ask the machine for counter arguments. I'm not really for this argument, so please give me some counter arguments why this might not be true. So what has happened here is that we're using GPT-3, but we're actually heavily prompt tuning it. to retrieve a good result regarding counter argument production. So I can now, take any one of these other counter arguments and hit the counter argument button again. So now the machine is kind of arguing against itself. And this is very useful. This can be very useful in situations where you want to improve your own arguments and learn how you might be wrong. So this, you might get into a more vision-like thinking of, oh, I want people to think better, to augment their arguments, to be able to be more critical with themselves. For example, in politics, that it's not kind of the main feature, but it's important in a civilizational perspective as well for all of this in terms of kind of intelligence augmentation. So I could also hit reframe the problem or start duplicating all of these and start generating different processes in parallel. So please make these more engaging, make these more clear, generate more counter arguments for this one. Please reflect around this other idea. And now the fact that I can make all of these very complex semantic operations on top of text, I think is something that Engelbart would classify as a new methods for working with text, right? So Engelbart, in his original analysis of an augmentation system, you would have, a human using an artifact, using language, and he's trained for it, but he's also using methodologies, right? So for a bunch of years, on digital text, we've only had find and replace, cut and paste as basic text operations. But now the fact that there is a basic text operation abstracted away enough that you can generate ideas with the click of a button, or make it more engaging, rewrite it for clarity, generate counter arguments, I think is something worth reflecting for, and I invite you to do so. Just this perspective of having very complex, semantic aware operations at the hit of a button, and what it can do to our collective brain. I don't know how I'm doing in terms of time. Am I overrunning?
No, I mean, you've been going for about 15 minutes, so feel free to go for, 5 or 10
Cool.
more of like demo, and then we can break
Yeah.
into the conversation. I did have a question about what you're working with already though, Pol.
Okay, I can show you one more thing.
I have a question about this whole kind of framing here
Yeah.
in terms of, like, to me, there's like nuggets of dialogue, with an AI or whatever. And then there's a canvas, which is basically, if it seems to me, just a kind of random layout of things, which I suppose you can then rearrange. I just don't have a sense of, like, why is this in a canvas?
Yeah.
So, and I could make up reasons why that's a cool, where the next step makes that cooler. But right now it feels kind of like two unrelated ideas that have just been glued together.
Yeah. So I will actually show you something, two things that kind of make a point for that. So one of them is for creative purposes or brainstorming processes. There are a few methods for brainstorming or ideation processes that actually already use canvases. So for example, diamond-like thinking. So you start with an idea, you go ahead and diverge, and then you converge, and then you end up with a more distilled idea of what you were going for. So this process of divergence and then convergence, I feel is more suited for a spatial software than for linear software. And that was one of the reasons why to do so. And another one is this is actually a UI building toolkit. So, all these buttons are pinned to one side of the screen, but they don't need to be pinned. So I can just basically delete this one. That was using DALL-E Mini, which is an outdated image generation algorithm. But I can go ahead and now download a more updated one, like Stable Diffusion, the one we were using earlier. Install the tool, and this button now, I can go ahead, pin it here, and now it's anchored to the screen, and I can just basically modified this entire piece of software because it has some new functionality. There is a new code component in it, and it can actually interact with the same output from the counter arguments or for the clarity button or the engaging button, because the medium is providing you with a common type system. So there is text, there is images, there is buttons, but these are actually types, and all apps either get the inputs and outputs of these apps and buttons and code are of the same type. Are the text input for this one is going to be the same text output for the other one, so I can compose tools actually. And I just installed some new application that someone else made, and I can click the button here from what the counter argument button generated, and I can make them kind of interoperable in that way. So the fact that this is actually a UI/machine learning app building toolkit, we felt that a canvas was good for that, much like HyperCard, because that was kind of our inspiration to start from. We did not start from the AI side of things. The AI side of things was something we discovered along the way, and it now makes a lot of sense in an augmentation perspective and from the canvas perspective as well, because it allows you to empower your creativity using all of these methods. And yeah, I just feel canvases are good for those kind of tasks.
Yeah, it makes sense, Paul, to apply your diverge converge argument. It seems like the canvas itself has allowed you to diverge and explore a bunch of different programs. Like, would this program be interesting? Would this program be interesting? And then then convert. And so far you found convergence on that AI use case.
Yes.
And I wonder if the iterative nature of the canvas has allowed you to diverge and converge more effectively and more quickly than if you were writing, say, custom software without a canvas, where you're like, okay, I have to take, there's like a lot of overhead around software development, right, to do what you guys are doing. But now that you guys done the hard work, so to speak, of like simplifying all that into this really simple language like Arbor, you can have more people exploring it more quickly and more divergently in order to find what's useful.
Definitely. It was just the hard work of creating the, I don't want to use the word, but the operating system for it, or the platform, because you got the substrate of the canvas, and then this language that enables you to add new features to it over time and kind of customize your own format. And so for example, these, and that kind of gives you insane feature velocity, right? You can try 5 different UIs or apps or models in the same day. Very, very quickly. There are now more than 80 tools in the toolbox that you can use. And I just want to show this one video, and then I'll be done. This is a power user using kind of, so Fermat and some of these tools. It's 3 months old, so it doesn't have image generation. But in this video, you'll see in 5 minutes, speed up to 1 minute, a writer using Fermat and all of these models and the canvas to come up with the idea for an article, write the article, and then promote the article as well. So the writer has just come up with the idea with the help of the AI. Ask the AI to write an introduction. Now he's asking the AI to explain the method. So he's using this upper left part here to give instructions to the AI. What do you want to do? And there are some more instructions over here that are kind of pre-made for him. So there is a pros and cons button, there's a SWOT analysis button he can use. So he's now judging which parts of the generative or the generated text he likes most. He's asked for the system to generate a pros and cons list here, so red and green, a SWOT analysis over here, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats of an idea. And he's now just judging, composing, deciding what to add. And he will now write an engaging tweet to promote the article as well. So kind of summarizing it and then adding some hashtags to promote it on Twitter. And I love this example because from Bill's question earlier, you can see the entire creative process that he took from the right side, and then the finished kind of article on the left. So it's completely up to the user to, I'm going to start up, and then go down, and then go to the right or go left. That kind of depends on how you think. And some softwares are really opinionated there. We are not the case. And yeah, yes, that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was awesome, Pol. Great demo and lots of really cool work there. Yeah, at this time, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or raise your hand if you choose, or drop them into the chat. I was just reading through the chat though, and I noticed Bill had also asked, I think he meant this as a question of like, at which point does software like this need to be open source? And then he referenced Smalltalk. At what scale does a platform like this need to be open source?
Yeah, like it's one thing that,
Yeah,
you sort of have your personal scale, like, oh, do I feel comfortable like sort of learning this whole kind of, arbor and everything else to use for 10 plus years. And then there's the other dimension of, are other people going to do that? And are we going to be able to share ideas and or tools that are part of that substrate? And that obviously, squares the issue of, do we all as a community want to bet on something like this, and what's the alternative? I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying it's a big question, and I have no
Bill,
idea of what the fucking
it's
answer.
Closed formats and silos forever. Thanks for playing.
exactly. No,
It'll all be fine once Adobe buys them.
Exactly. Thanks, Figma, right? No, so there is two things that could be open source here, right? The system, so Fermat itself, or the tools. Right now we're advocating such that everyone can read the code from the tools, because that's what you're actually running on your computer. All the tools are run on the client. So we download a tool, it runs on your browser, and you can always check what API the tool is using, check if that code is doing something malicious or not. But the original intention for that decision was not so much checking if there's something wrong, but more giving people making software closer to the people. And the fact that an 8-year-old could just inspect the element and not get blurbs, but get well-formatted code, and he can read and understand and learn, is something I maybe didn't have when I was a kid. And so now, with Fermat, you could learn how to build tools from scratch, which I think is something HyperCard had. So open source is very important from tools perspective. And well, on the business side, Fermat is not open source right now. So that's also, obviously.
Again, I'm just going to say this for the record: licensing is not a business model. So this is the thing that we keep getting trapped in different interesting ways. I like what you're saying about inspectability and tool portability, essentially plugins. There's many different platforms that perform effective capture through plugins, regardless of the licensing model of the plugins. I think some of these things become really interesting when they become even more portable. There is a fantastic value of having an environment like Fermat that stuff can compute inside of. And there is value and ease of saying, absolutely, I don't want to have to run it myself. I want to pay Fermat $10 a month. I think what you said before about having stuff running locally is really interesting. So I would challenge you to say, your business model is in not serving the Bills of the world, of which there's approximately 4 that want to self-host it locally. Your business is the fat tail of people who are like, this is amazing, let me pay you. And I think the next thing ends up being is network effects, right? I would say, how do you take those computational experiences and spread them beyond just being embedded in Fermat? Those are just open questions for me.
My thoughts on network effects here and compound effects as well is that with the toolbox, which is kind of cute right now, but I think is where the power also relies, because I could write a piece of software very simple. You could write another piece of software very simple. We both publish it to the toolbox. A third party can come without our permission. Just if we publish it on the community, download both your tool and my tool and create glue them together and create some kind of third tool. And now you get the idea of packages, right? So tools are both user facing, but also developer libraries, because a developer can join them and create a third thing, which is cooler, and republish that and then get that compound effect going. So we're exploring that, and also on the side of making money and then the toolbox, right? So imagine if you could put $1 tools on the toolbox and share them, and then in a very Ted Nelson style, your tool, my tool, $1 each, someone else's tool, $3, then the royalties for the code get distributed. But that's just something in the vision.
Quan, you had your hand up.
Oh yes, I just have a question. So when I see the demo, it keeps reminding me of Miro plus an AI assistant. So now, if I say I have Miro plus an AI assistant, how is your tool different from that? And in terms of features, and also the use cases for those features, if there's any difference?
Definitely. So Miro meets AI is what we've discovered. Is what we've discovered it to be now. It wasn't the original vision. We just making these spatial canvas, end user programmable, the toolbox idea. People can share software, build spatial aware kind of programs, and kind of bring HyperCard back, putting the personal back in computing, all of this. Then we found, that AI is kind of has this property of unlocking creativity, and now the thinking behind is precisely what you're asking. So, which are the best possible use cases for that? And we're still narrowing that down. But right now we're finding that running design thinking workshops, brainstorming workshops, where you get stuck at some point and there is a magic button up there that you click it and gives you more creativity, for copywriters, for content creators, Instagram, social media content creation, whatever. There's a bunch of things to do, but I think we're finding out which are those 5 first use cases. The idea here is that we already kind of support the long tail of hackers. So if you want to build something, just there is a documentation, you can go ahead. The language is always being improved. It's not perfect yet, but obviously you can go ahead, and then that's kind of the long tail of use cases, which like 1-person use case is fine, you can build it. Much like Excel, right? There is a few use cases which are very obvious, and then it's a software building toolkit. You can make practically anything you want in this spreadsheet scenario here. So we've been called the Excel for text. I think that's somewhat, it's not a perfect description, but it can help answer the question.
I mean, in the sense that people don't understand what HyperCard is anymore, because
Exactly.
It's too far in the past. I don't know that that's helpful either.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, we're floating in this space where there's visuals, there's canvases, there's programming, right? So the whole Replit meets OpenAI. For me, the main interface, Jess, of Replit is a code IDE, which has a very different surface area that people bounce off in different ways. Because I'm a tiddlywiki maximalist, those who know me is I'm not actually one of those. That I actually that is the feel that I get from some of this crop of things, right? So you have your own programming language and environment in there, and you let people remix it to build apps of their own, and you have the double challenges of you could do anything, along with, oh shit, you can do anything, and I'm lost in a twisty maze of passages.
Exactly.
I think the Miro thing is problematic, right? Lots of people use this in this space for this. This isn't Miro. Miro is a B2B SaaS tool for corporations to do various things. It gets repurposed in a lot of other different ways, but even the business model, I find it problematic. Communities leaning into it because there's no portability. There's nothing. You're stuck forever. The hosting service goes down. There's no common formats. You can get a PDF out. That's about it. So, thinking about something like Webflow, I wonder if there's an export mode for pieces of Fermat to be exported as interactive experiences.
So yeah, I mean, wow, you like that was a great analysis. I am also sad that HyperCard, I'm just kind of reading the chart as in any way I can. I am also sad that HyperCard is kind of outdated as a reference. Yeah, but so I have this maxim in the office, like, oh, this user is asking for PDF export. I'm like, fucking no, like, don't print this. Like, this is not printable. Like, if it's printable, it's not computable. This is not meant to be on a piece of paper, because that kind of defeats the entire computable medium thing. I mean, I know like at some point I'm gonna bend because business or something, but yeah, I really kind of hate thinking about printing it. We were thinking about exporting, so using all these Zapier, Integromat tools, where you can kind of get data into the system and then process it, get data out of the system as well to other sources. Yeah, stop exporting that PDFs, exactly. But there is something in exporting the Fermat experience kind of in a package. So one very low-hanging way to do it is just share this Fermat space with a permalink that will allow anyone on the internet to play with what you just built. But in the pipeline, there is there is this feature or thing we want to build, which is export a Fermat app as a desktop app, not the entirety of Fermat, but just a Fermat space, like you would export a HyperCard stack into a single kind of like its own package application.
We've just had a massive thread in the background. I wouldn't want to throw you into like export it into JS, but I wonder if compiling to WASM is a thing that could be explored. WASM is sort of an interesting thing because one of the concerns I have, I don't have this concern. I think I think there's two pieces to it. Export to WASM, people are like, it's a binary. There's no view source. It's like, well, yes, but you can share the source so that other people can recreate it. And WASM is extremely portable, right? So there's something interesting there, right? Like where me then embedding it on a web page somewhere, tossing it around, sharing it, running it on my desktop doesn't interfere with Fermat, the business model, because the multiplayer user model and everything else that is the connected Fermat experience is not the same as we've been saying, the artifact of a WASM export.
Exactly. I do feel like the multiplayer experience is going to be, it's actually coming out in a month from now. But yeah, you can right now share that kind of the finished thing or the app so that people can play with it. But the Fermat VM that I'm seeing on the chat that was what I was trying to express. Like you can export your stuff and use it, and even like people could write their own visualizers for our data format or their own interpreter for our language, like in a very open source way.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
Fascinating.
Pol, fantastic work. Love what you guys are doing.
Thank
I
you.
feel like you're exploring a lot of directions simultaneously now. AI integration, spatial canvas ergonomics, writing your own programming language that you're now like having to maintain and run that simplifies JavaScript. I mean, there's just like, you guys are taking on a bunch of big problems, which is really exciting. So like,
and the hardware, which under the hood, at some point.
Yeah, please come back to the
Thank you.
hardware piece. So yeah,
I'm trying.
At this point, I want to switch over to Paul from Natto.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And the Paul has been working on Natto for, I guess it's been a year and a half now. I've been kind of following along for a bit.
Yeah, year and a half, almost 2 years at this point.
That's awesome. So if natto.dev, we'll drop a link in the chat. And yeah, I've just been enjoying watching Paul. By the way, Paul is one of the more entertaining people to follow on Twitter. Shout out to, he always has like nice little UI demos of the things he's thinking about on Natto and exploring different ways of doing things. And he's really great about like trying things out in public. Like I remember when the multiplayer stuff dropped, he just dropped a link in Twitter and he's like, hey, come jump into this shared canvas and see what happens. And so it's neat to be able to kind of walk along with Paul while he's working on and exploring this stuff, but excited to have you share with us today, Paul. Go ahead.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that great intro. And I'm going to try to share my screen. All right. Does everyone see my Arc browser here? Cool. So I'm going to try to do this, made mini slides inside Natto. And so again, my name is Paul, and I'm excited to share with you all Natto here. And so what is Natto? It's what I think of as a playground for computation that's very centered around JavaScript. And so as a background, I spend most of my waking hours thinking about code. I love to write code, but I also think of code as kind of like the lowest level and fundamental medium for interacting with the computer and gaining access to the powers of computation. You can abstract on top of it, but at the end of the day, the computer takes instructions, and code is how we interact with that. And so when a lot of people think about code, you think of like complexity, a lot of big systems, but even something as simple as like 1 + 2 or small function calls, like that's code, right? It's just, so I'm really interested in how can we remove as much of the incidental complexity as possible, and hopefully turn code into just another like item in your toolkit that you can use. And I find myself moving in that direction with Natto. So I'm excited to share this with you. So I'm going to do some demo stuff and then talk about some themes. So for this demo part, I want to try to make this interactive again. And let me see here. So, all right. So I'm going to share a link in chat. I assume most of you are at a computer. Let's see how to chat. All right. All right. So hopefully this works. So you have like cursors running around. So this first part is gonna be a little interactive. Yeah, so feel free to play around, but again, it's a spatial interface. It looks a lot like Figma or other spatial interface tools. And so what I'd like you all to do is find a little space on the canvas. You can scroll around and press E, and that will select the paint tool and then drag a rectangle on the screen. And so there are all these different types of paints, but the core building block of Natto are these eval panes. And eval panes, if you've created one, has two parts. There's a top section and a output section. So the top section is where you can just write some code. So try typing some like JavaScript expression. So you can type something like 1 + 2 or like math.random or some things like here. I see some people trying to write like multiple lines of JavaScript. By default, each pane is an expression, so that's just like a single value. But if you want to write multiple expressions, you can click the settings button in the header and switch to function body mode. And so, this is JavaScript. So one of the ideas behind Natto is that everything here is just plain old JavaScript. So you have to add your vars or const exactly. And then for this one here, you can add a return statement at the end. So you can do return x plus y, etc. Yeah. So zoom out. So what I like to what I like you all to do is in your pane or create a new pane, just like write your name as a string. So in JavaScript, you just use double quotes and write your name. And then what I'd like you to do is so hopefully return your name as a string in your pane. So you can have stuff on top of it, but yeah, exactly. Like I see Grant's name here. And what I'd like you to do is find someone else's pane and then drag the arrow in the top right onto another section on the screen. And what that will do is that will create another pane, and there's built-in reactivity. So this is a lot like spreadsheets here, where whenever a pane runs, it will rerun any panes connected to it as well. And I'd like you to just say like hi to that person. So here I have Grant's name. I'm just gonna say hi plus Grant. Just a little fun way to see all the different names. And if you want, you can press the Shift-1 and that will zoom to fit. So you can just like get a top level view. Cool, so this is the first part of the demo. For the next part, what I'd like you to do, so here you're seeing the multiplayer sync version. And so this is like, this canvas is stored on like Natto servers, but you can use Natto completely offline. And what I'd like you to do next is, does anyone have any questions about this first part before I move on? All right, hopefully we can answer some questions later. But what I'd like you to do now is hover over the top left of the screen, where the Natto.dev in the top left corner, and then click new canvas. And interrupt me if it's not working for you, but you should get a new blank canvas. And so this is just completely local, running in your browser. It's not synced anywhere. And what I'd like you to do is right click anywhere on the screen and click import pane. And so in JavaScript, there's npm, which is kind of like this package ecosystem. And let's say you want to generate like a UUID. So what I'd like you to do inside the import pane is type UUID and press enter. And hopefully you can, that will import the UUID npm package into your browser, and you should see the contents of that package. What I'd like you to do now is if you hold down Command, if you're on a Mac, or I think it's Control on Windows and Linux, you should see things light up in blue. And so let's say we want to generate a UUID v4. What I'd like you to do is hold down Command and then drag the function word next to v4. And what that does is it gives you a reference to that function. So this is something that I'm excited about, which is like making code feel tangible. So now that I have a reference to the v4 function, you can call it. And there you go. You just generated a UUID with very little code. And Natto takes a lot of inspiration from design tools. So one of my favorite interactions from design tools is, and Spatial Canvases, is the ability to duplicate objects and frames, because it lends itself really nicely for experimenting and exploring ideas. So what I'd like you to do here is hold down Option or the Alt key, and then drag the header of that pane. And so what that does is it duplicates the pane. And so now we've generated two UUIDs. And let's say we want to generate a couple more. You can select the panes just by dragging a rectangle to select them. And then again, Option drag again. And so you can just keep duplicating panes, experimenting with them while keeping your original artifact. So I think it's this feel of like a quick dip branch in this visual space where you have like the visual artifacts to work with. So the last thing I want to show on this screen here is that in the top of the menu, and the top of the screen where it's next to unsaved canvas, you can click Save As, and you can save this Natto canvas to your local file system. And that's just, each canvas is just a JSON file with like snippets of JSON inside the JSON. So you can check out the JSON, and if you save it to your canvas and you keep editing the canvas, it will keep writing to the file system. And you can open it up as well. And I want to talk a little bit about interop later, but there is, yeah. So let me go back. Okay. So let me go back to the talk here. For the last part of the demo, I'm going to speed run a little bit here. So if you just watch my screen, I'm going to just go through a quick use case. So here I have a URL, which is an API for the Art Institute of Chicago, where I can find artworks that they have. This gives me all the artworks for Picasso that they have. So I'm going to create there are these template panes. And so there's an HTTP request template pane. I'm going to paste the URL in, choose JSON, and then click use template, and then paste that onto my screen. And so here I can see the response of that URL. And behind the scenes, this template pane is just generating an eval pane that we created before with code. But I've basically created this thing without writing code. Here I can prove it to you. I just duplicated using that same duplicate function. And then I can eject the pane here. And this is just like a snippet of JavaScript that I could have written myself. And so here in the response, I see some data here, which is an array of the different artworks. So I want to explore this a little more. So I'm going to hold on Command and then drag to get a reference to the array. And here, in the real world, you're often dealing with like lists of items, often with like the same schema structure. This JSON viewer is okay, but I can go into the settings here and change how the output is rendered. And so I'm going to switch it to a table, because tables are a natural way to consume, tabular structured data. And here with this table, I can sort. And one thing I can do here is I can drag the column header. So I just drag the column header of score, which gets me all the values of that column. But again, this is just an eval pane with a snippet of JavaScript that I could have written myself. And so I'm really excited about exploring ways to write code. So everything here, kind of one of the principles that everything is just JavaScript, but then there are these UI interactions on top. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get a reference to an image ID. So again, I just command dragged and generated a snippet of JavaScript. I have a function here which takes an image ID and returns a URL. So I'm going to use autocomplete here, and that will auto connect the pane. There are no globals in this space. You have to all the connections have to be explicit. So I have an image URL here. And finally, I'm going to wrap this image URL in a snippet of JavaScript. So now I have a HTML image tag. And finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the settings again and choose HTML. So I'm going to render this HTML string on the canvas. Then I'm going to speed run a little bit more here, which is I'm going to introduce a state pane, which allows me to add client state to the canvas. And I'm going to write a few things here. Let me see. Let me set to artwork. So I'm going to use an alternative API here. Artwork. So this alternate API does the same thing, but it allows me to add an on-row click. And a state pane has two outputs. One is the value of the pane, and another one is a setter function, which lets you call it to set the value of the pane. So whenever I click on one of these rows here, it sets the state pane with the value of that pane. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect this back here. And so I just created a small mini app here where when I click a row, it's a quick image browser for different artworks of Picasso. And one last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these 3 panes here and then just duplicate them. And now I have 2 image browsers. So if I want to compare 2 of Picasso's artworks and just like put them side by side here, maybe I want to like have another one, you know, and go crazy. So let's see, how am I? So that's a quick demo. Some ideas I want to talk through. Does anyone have any questions before I? All right, I'm gonna keep going, but we can have.
Can we just pause to say like that's awesome, and a lot of people's minds are blown.
Awesome.
I think there's no questions because we're all like slack jawed, like move jaw back up to normal position. Anyway,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know I sped through this part, but I encourage you to play with it, Natto. So I have some more examples to show, but I'm going to talk briefly about some design principles about how I'm thinking about Natto. One is that, again, I'm thinking of just building everything on top of JavaScript. I almost think of Natto as kind of this UI for JavaScript. So I can export this whole save to file, this whole canvas, and I want that JSON to hopefully if you look at the JSON file, it's actually pretty readable because these are just literal strings in the JavaScript file. And so one of the ideas here is shortening loops. I think a lot about like how can we shorten feedback loops, because shortening feedback loops creates a tighter connection between you, the human, and the tool, and makes it easier to enter and stay in the state of flow. So I think a lot about how we can shorten the gap between idea and execution and input and output. And I think about input and output on multiple axes. So there's time. So how can you shorten the time between your input and your feedback? By default in Natto, things actually run as you type on every keystroke. And then there's shortening the distance between your input and output. So in Natto, so each of these slides here is just a little bit of markdown that I've made. And so the input and output are co-located with each other. Usually like in traditional programming environments, a lot of times you're typing a lot in your code editor, and then you like switch to a different window or a different application to see the output, like your terminal or your browser. But here it's as close as possible. And then there's also the distance between related things as well. So with Natto, things that are related to each other in the abstract world tend to be more proximate and close nearby on the canvas. I think a lot about how we can leverage metaphors that we use in everyday life. So you have spatial canvases. We think of time flowing from left to right, top to bottom. And so spatial canvases are really nice for that. Things that are related tend to be closer together. And then there's embodiment, which is the representation and expression of something in like a tangible and visible form. And so code is pretty abstract, right? Like we're all kind of just looking at, pixels on the screen, and with code, you're dealing with abstract concepts like variables and functions. But in Natto, each of these panes usually contains like a snippet of code, a function, or a piece of remarkable data. And so a pane gives you some materiality for these abstract concepts. And then so I can, move it around, pick it up, resize it, etc. And yeah, so I think a lot about how we can make code more tangible and visible. So that's what you saw with like the command drag. Like if you see a piece of data and you want to play with it, you should be able to just, touch it. If in the real world, right? If there's, something you want to work with, you just grab it and go. But here, just to push this even further, here's an experimental thing where I have a piece of code here which sums the numbers from 1 to 10, but you can enable this like inspector, which will highlight identifiers in this light blue, and I can see the variables. And then I can, again, like command drag. Like the number here is not that interesting, but you can imagine where if you're making like a HTTP request and you want to like play with the response, this here kind of removes the need to like add console logs if you're, which is a common practice when you're writing a bunch of code. Let's see, and finally, a couple other things. I want to say, like, I think a lot about code, and that's kind of my angle to all this stuff, but I see so many parallels between tools for thought and programming environments. Whenever there's a new tool for thought or there's a new feature announced, I almost always find that that idea applies directly to programming environments as well, because both these things are in the business of organizing and navigating information. And code actually has an advantage here where code is very structured and it's inherent with a lot of like rich semantic relationships. You have these functions and these functions call another one, where with note-taking tools, you have to add your own semantics and relationships, right? You have to add your own double brackets, but code kind of comes with this for free. So yeah, for ideas for new programming environments, you just look at the tools for thought community. And so a lot of ideas here are like not having to name things, right? If I just create a pane here, I can have a value, and then like I didn't type any names, it just defaults to value here, and then I can do ×2, and then and the idea of like not having to think about where a piece of code goes as well. In code, there's just so much energy spent on like, all right, I have to put this thing in a file, which file to put it in, let's make a utils file, and you see a lot of parallel there with kind of like your daily note and kind of your note-taking tool. All right. Last thing, so I have a couple of things that we can talk about, spatial interfaces, but one I'll talk about here is interop. So one thing I want to show here is I'll show consuming other things in Natto and then consuming Natto and other things. So I've been using logseq as my tool of choice right now. So what I did was I compiled the logseq graph parser into a JavaScript file. So I have a pane here, which is just, this is the logseq graph parser. And then inside Natto, you can consume HTTP APIs or like NPM packages, but you can also read and write from your file system. So here I'm just selecting my logseq directory locally on my computer. And so I'm going to grant access. And so what I did was it just pulled all the files. So I can look at one of my daily notes here, commander as text. So I'm seeing that inside Natto. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to feed all these files into the logseq graph parser, right? And so now I have this data script database inside Natto, and then I can query that. So here I want to find all my to-dos. So logseq uses data script, and it models your networked outliner as a database. And so here I have a data script query, and here it returned an array. Again, I'm going to just change this to, I want to view this as a table. So here I can see all my tasks here. So these are, if I want to see like all my current tasks, I can just type like now, and then here are my current tasks. But because this is programmable, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this query quickly. And then I'm going to replace this query with this string. I'm going to add a state pane, change it to be a select type. And so I want now, later, and done. Default it to now, and then let's replace this now here with value. So what I just did here was I created a small little UI here. So I can see all the tasks I have that are active now, later, all the stuff that all my tasks marked with later, and done. So you can read and write to your file system from Natto. So I'm excited if people can use Natto as a way to inject computation into their workflows, right? And so here, like, I can almost create my own, if you take it to a limit, you can kind of build your own PKM tool inside Natto. Right? If you squint, you can see like, all right, if I can write to the file, this is just markdown. And so So this is an example of how you can consume and maybe build your own UIs or inject computation where you can build your own views on top of your systems. And then again, like all these canvases are just JSON, right? And so there's an open source library here. Most of the work behind Natto is UI, and the actual evaluation engine, the execution engine, is like 50 lines or something, because it's maybe more than that. Okay, it's like 200 lines, but the idea is that you can take that JSON file either from a local file on your computer, or if you use a synced canvas, you can connect it from the API. Just the API returns the JSON, and then feed it into this library here, and run and consume your Natto canvas in another environment. So I have examples of consuming a Natto canvas in another Natto canvas, or you can consume it in your own web app, create React app or Replit, or anywhere where you can run JavaScript. Yeah, that's I have a couple more things to say, but I'd love to open it up to discussion now. Maybe the one last thing I'll show is, like, if we want to talk about spatial canvases and scale, here's an example where, I broke this art project into Lingdong's Fishstraw art project, which is single file JavaScript. I broke it up into like this big canvas here, and there's some ideas here to explore on like scaling spatial interfaces. Maybe the most interesting one is this thing called omakase layout, which does auto layout of your canvas. And if you focus a canvas, the idea here is when you focus the canvas, it'll rearrange the canvas so that your inputs are to your left and your outputs are to the right. So if I focus another canvas, so the idea here is that when you're looking at a piece of code or something, you're interested in seeing like the connected entities to the side. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions.
Amazing stuff, Paul. Oh my gosh. Cool. Yep, mind blown. Questions?
How are you able to pour all this effort into this as a singleton creator of the future?
Yeah,
Paul.
Yeah, good question. I'm actually, like, as of right now, this is turned into more a side project, but so I'm actually working on other stuff right now to make a little money. But I did work full time on this for over a year, and savings and stuff. But it's still something I am still working on it, and I hope to become more full time on it again in the future.
Okay. I'm gonna say this in a different way. Like Pol is on his own. He's like, I've got like a real company in Barcelona, and we got to figure our shit out, and we got to like figure out a business model. For you, where do we insert dollars to Natto?
Oh yeah. Oh, thank you. I love that people just use it. Just use the tool. I think it. I don't know.
Okay, Jess. We'll take this offline afterwards. For sure. I think that how can you help where people spread it and talk about it and spread the word? Like, absolutely, that goes without saying. I think a bunch of the rest of this ends up being, this is amazing. How does it live on? And that's sort of our, perhaps a meta question. Like we started Tools for Thought with this like vague hand wavy notion around interop. We're far in the weeds of being like, do we need an interoperable windowing layer for the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. He's like, yeah, can you add that to your list of doing as well?
That's it.
Yeah, so this is really great.
Oh, you got a user. Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you put trademarks and this together, that's it.
Yeah.
Amazing. So are you going with VNFS already or not yet? The Vision Web Native file system. No?
I think for both Newsphere and Fission, it would be interesting. Like, again, the requirement is, and Jess, I think this is something for us to explore, is essentially a screen share of which NPM package to plug into Natto so that people can retrieve files from IPFS. That's the interesting thing about this open environment. That's essentially it, right, Paul?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This, I think of Natto as just a different UI for a JavaScript REPL. And so anything you can do in JavaScript it's basically a new UI for like the Chrome console. Sometimes, like before Natto, I think the quickest way, if I wanted to just write a small snippet of JavaScript, is I would go to like google.com, open up the console here and like type of like paste a bit of JavaScript in. And so Natto just kind of like formalizes that flow. So yeah.
Cool. So what are the Paul, what are the things that you've discovered? I think I queued you up that I would ask some of these questions. What are some of the things that you've discovered about sort of spatialness over this last year and a half? Like what is significantly easier because you're in a spatial canvas? And then also, like, where have you run against the grain? So as you've come across something like, I tried to do this in a spatial canvas and it was just awful. Like, or this part of it still feels hard or bad, and I haven't figured out what the design solution is here.
Yeah. So spatial interfaces. I know I spend a lot of time in spatial interfaces, but I'm actually like lukewarm mixed about them in some ways, because I think I really like spatial interfaces as a one of n views on top of something else, actually. So like, for example, in Notion, on a database, you can have like Kanban boards, and like it'd be cool if a spatial canvas was like another view on top of it. I don't know if so yeah, spatial interfaces here, I think they're great for exploring and exploration and experimenting, right? With like the Fermat use case, like where you're trying to generate ideas. I love the divergence and convergence thing. Like that's spatial interfaces. There is something fundamental about spatial interfaces that make them nice, which is they map to the real world. And 2D, there's something about like the UIs that we work with are 2D. And so there's some like isomorphic relationship there, which like there's some fundamental nature to spatial interfaces. I really like them for session-based use cases. So it'd be nice if like every time you're exploring a code base, you start off with a blank canvas, and then you drag things out, and then you don't have to, you can like use your memory palace, your memory spatial reasoning skills for that session, but you don't have to like, where spatial interfaces, I think, struggle a little bit are, it's extra bits of information that you have to manage, right? All your items now have like another X, Y, and size. And now if you want to like go find something, you need either, like it's not as compact as a list of all your files. You have to like remember, all right, top right corner or top bottom left corner, and you know, like, and so that's one of the things I'm exploring is like multiple layouts. How can we make it easier to navigate spatial canvases? I think once the contents don't fit on one screen, I think a lot about scale. Right, and especially scale across multiple users. Like, okay, I know like how the canvas is laid out, but if I send you this thing and I'm like if I send you this and I'm like, all right, good luck, like go read this thing. Like you have to, like this is not satisfying.
Yeah, here's an interesting example of that, Paul, that I've noticed in the Fission Discord. So if anybody's been in the Fission Discord, we have a lot of channels. And one thing that happens automatically when people join Fission is they get the ability to reorder those channels as being like a Fission admin. And what invariably happens is before people realize they're moving the channels around and they don't realize they're moving it for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And but there's so many of them. It's like literally several pages of scroll worth of channels that they feel a need to like move the things that they want up to the top, that kind of stuff to kind of tidy up, but they don't have their own view like you do in Slack. You're modifying the list of Discord channels for everyone. And so there's just like the rite of passage of like, oh, you're new here. Don't rearrange the channels. But the same thing happens, you're right, in a spatial canvas. As soon as I jump into your spatial canvas, I'm like, oh, this doesn't belong over here, it belongs over there. And then I just moved it for you, which is kind of a problem.
Yeah, I'd love to show you this quick experiment that I've been doing. So you can enter this mode here. I've been thinking about that exact problem, which I think is a big issue with spatial canvases. But here I just entered what I call a sandbox layout. And so I can like move things around and like rearrange things to accommodate my current task and workflow. And once I'm done like doing my task, I just like exit the sandbox layout and I'll revert everything to their original position. And so what my design, like ways I approach the design here is I think about how you would do things in like the real life and in the physical world and map it to the digital realm. But then you also want to think about like, what are the advantages of working with digital bits instead of physical atoms? And so this ability to like duplicate things, like what becomes cheap and free because you're working in the digital space. And so this ability to like in the real world, if you have a whiteboard and you rearrange things, good luck like
getting it back,
reverting. But that's something, it's just some data structure that you clone. So
no, that's really cool. Not as compact as a list. I was watching
I'm trying to figure out what the wording for that is, where people can have their own I guess shared views. I think shared views are super powerful, like literally even the same information. Where as long as you can share it with the link, you can share context with someone else. So like there's both the like, here's the view for me that you might keep in a certain mode that makes context for you. And I think this is similar to the whole what if spatial canvas view. I mentioned this before, but Kanban became a UX tool, an UX affordance, because Trello figured it out a way of easily doing it on the web with this really nice drag and drop, and everyone's like, this is a useful view and it's done everywhere. So perhaps the provocative question, if it hasn't come up before, who will build the tool that lets anyone build a spatial canvas view?
That literally is TL draw.
Yeah,
that's exactly what Steve's working on.
Depending on, like, I think that's very drawing centric.
Yeah. Anyone where equals developer, where from the set of developers. I got you. Yeah, possibly, right? So and Natto is maybe like, or again, I'm just going to keep prodding Pol, right? Is like, okay, who's gonna make the portable spatial canvas that we all component that we all adopt, right? That is the open source component that anyone can embed or upgrade to the integrated version. So right now we've seen an explosion of video in the past 2 or 3 years, where video has turned into a completely API-able service that you can embed in your app. So Twilio has one. I think it's Live, or the Live API, where you can literally, even Zoom has an API where you can put Zoom inside your app. So there's maybe something in that direction that could be interesting for us all.
Yeah, definitely. I think with Natto, my angle is I think a lot about programming, and so I think like spatial canvas is one of my explorations. Before Natto, I was working on this different ways to view and explore code, and here my first iteration was a spatial canvas where you can look at code and drag references and stuff like that. But then my next versions actually moved away from spatial canvas, where like you can have multiple columns where you can there are less degrees of freedom. I found was kind of nice actually. Like you're still working on the spatials in the space. And then there are other versions where I was exploring Miller columns and things like that, where just comparing different approaches.
It's like a tiles approach where you have like all the snapping tiles together.
Yeah, like window management.
In terms of this being multiple views, have you like played around with getting this inside VS Code so that I could like take my my source code files as they are and like represent them somehow in a canvas, and then like, you know, quickly switch back and forth between a file-based view and a canvas-based view?
Yeah, so that's what this exploration is more of, where I'm dealing with like traditional files, code files, and each of these is just like a file, but there's like some semantic thing where I can like zoom in on a entity inside that file. With Natto, because of like the reactivity system, it's hard to like, it's hard to port an existing file, like JavaScript file, into Natto, but it's something I've thought a lot about. I've looked quite a bit into inserting Natto as a extension, so you can have like, but
like you said, it's a more interactive REPL. It's like I could run the JavaScript REPL inside inside VS Code, and that's a thing. But it'd be much nicer to have like a richer REPL experience inside VS Code, potentially. Yeah, this is interesting. Let's see. Any other questions for Paul?
Yeah.
So we have 1 minute left. I'm really curious, Paul, what are you working on next? If you're like, what are your next things you want to explore with Natto here? Or what are some explorations that are not Natto, but are kind of jumping off points for you?
Yeah. So the thing I'm actually working on with Natto right now is highlighting, like building a gallery, doing a little more like marketing type work to kind of get people's like when they so they don't have blank canvas syndrome when they approach it, so to like show off different use cases. Because here, like I've been using this, I have hundreds of, like not hundreds, but maybe 100 canvases where I've been just using Natto for all sorts of different things. And so I want to make the new user experience better. I've been working on like dark mode, but one thing I'm interested in exploring is the way to abstract inside Natto. So in these live coding environments, a lot of times you're operating in real data, and that flow is really nice where it's simple data flow. But once you add like something like a function or something, you kind of lose the like if I have a pane, like if I have a pane here that's like x plus x times 2, which is double, like all you see here is function, right? And so I can call like the function on 5 and returns 10, but I want to explore, like, can you turn a pane into a function? So if I have a pane here that's like a value times 2, can I turn this concrete pane that works on concrete data into an abstract unit, into a reusable abstract unit that I can use somewhere else on the pane?
Gotcha. Yeah, it really feels like Fermat is like one level of abstraction right above Natto. Right? Like Natto, if you look at a Fermat canvas and you haven't opened the behavior inspector, it's just buttons and images and text blocks and that kind of stuff. Underneath, there's all the stuff that Natto is doing, without the sort of wire and diagram, like being able to snap functions together and stuff like that. But yeah, I wonder if that's another layer of abstraction for Natto too, of like, how could you reduce Natto to being like just the interface and make the code disappear such that I could interact with a Natto program without having to look at all the code. So thinking of layers as opposed to layouts.
Yeah, exactly. So like here it's an OpenAI playground, which is lower level, like you said. And then like these, the idea with these template panes is that you can have like these panes inside of like a mini canvas inside of with like some UI that generates like these panes behind the scenes. So kind of abstracting away from the code.
That's awesome. Well, I just noticed that we're 2 minutes over. Paul, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing and the way you've been doing it in public and showing off what you're doing. And we're happy to come along for the ride. And Boris is absolutely serious about helping you find a way to keep doing this and doing what you love and doing that in public so that we can all benefit from it. So we'll reach out and chat about it. And Pol, thanks for all you're doing with Firma. really excited about this mutual search we're on to figure out what spatial canvases are good for and how we can use them to sort of augment our brains and work together more effectively. So thanks for being here, y'all.
Thank
Thanks.
you guys.
All right, I'm gonna hit stop recording.